The second part of tonight's event is a screening of the film called The Masculinity, which looks at gender roles and the enormous pressures of masculinity that face so many of our young men today in this country. After that, we will welcome to the stage 4 people who will be part of a panel discussion whose work directly addresses some of the issues facing young men today. So with that, thank you all, and The Masculinity.
Stop crying.
Stop with the tears.
Don't cry.
Pick yourself up.
Stop with the emotion.
Don't be a pussy.
Don't let nobody disrespect you.
Be cool and be kind of a dick.
Always keep your mouth shut.
Nobody likes a tattletale.
Bros come before hoes.
Don't let your woman run your life.
You a bitch.
What a fag.
Get laid. Do something.
Be a man.
Be a man.
Grow some balls.
The 3 most destructive words that every man receives when he's a boy is when he's told to be a man.
We've constructed an idea of masculinity in the United States that doesn't give young boys a way to feel secure in their masculinity, so we make them go prove it all the time.
Within their peer group culture, each of them is posturing based on how the other boys are posturing, and what they end up missing is what they each really want, which is just that closeness.
In good times, guys are like really close to each other, but when things get a little bit worse, you're on your own.
From middle school, I had 4 really close friends. Once I kind of went into high school, I struggle finding people I can talk to because I feel like I'm not supposed to get help.
Our kids get up every morning. They have to prepare their mask for how they're gonna walk to school. A lot of our students don't know how to take the mask off. What is it you don't let people see? Almost 90% of you have pain and anger on the back of that paper.
If you never cry, then you have all these feelings stuffed up inside of you, and then you can't get them out.
They really buy into a culture that doesn't value what we've feminized. If we're in a culture that doesn't value caring, doesn't value relationships, doesn't value empathy, you are going to have boys and girls, men and women go crazy.
I had anger issues in high school. I felt like an outcast.
I've been suspended at least once every year I was here.
We would just look for trouble and just try to fight.
Boys are more likely to act out. They're more likely to become aggressive. Most people miss that as depression, or see it as a conduct disorder, or just a bad kid.
I felt like just giving up on life. You know, I actually had suicide thoughts in my head at 6th grade.
I felt alone for a long time, and I actually thought about killing myself.
Whether it's homicidal violence or suicidal violence, people resort to such desperate behavior only when they are feeling shamed and humiliated, or feel they would be if they didn't prove that they were real men.
If you're told from day one, don't let nobody disrespect you, and this is the way you handle it as a man, respect is linked to violence.
If I can man up, why step down from that, you feel me?
It's like instinct.
So man up!
Man up!
Man up!
Man up! Pull some fucking balls!
Act like a man! Be a man.
Be a man!
For my kids, I was gonna end this hyper-masculine narrative here.
My name is Frank Blaney. I'm the project coordinator for the LA Fathers Program out of Children's Hospital. We serve young fathers ages 15 to 25 and help them get their lives together to be there for their children. I was also a previous employee and current volunteer of a wonderful organization called Peace Over Violence. There I was a director of youth leadership development and ran groups called My Strength groups. It's called My Strength is Not for Hurting. And this was a young men's leadership development group trying to address some of these issues that this movie raised. And I'm going to go ahead and ask each of the panelists briefly to just go ahead and introduce themselves, and then we will kind of jump into trying to break this down a little bit. So Leah, Aldridge, would you mind beginning?
Good evening. It's so lovely to see so many familiar faces and new faces that I hope will continue to be familiar. My name is Leah Aldridge, and I am a former volunteer, an employee, and returning volunteer to an organization, a fabulous organization called Peace Over Violence.
Hello. My name is David Sanchez. I'm a street poet,
teaching artist and founder of Seed and Soul Organic Gardening.
Hello, my name is Derek Richardson. I'm an NBA referee and co-executive director. I say co-executive director with my beautiful wife, Stephanie, of the Why Can We Make a Difference Foundation.
Wonderful. So I was just going to ask each of the panelists to kind of give us a couple of minutes of what their overall impression of the message of this movie was and what they feel the relevance is in regards to what's going on in Los Angeles and our society with young men. And ladies first, Leah, would you mind starting?
It's nice to know that chivalry is not dead in a conversation about masculinity. Okay, so let me just start by saying I am not now, nor have I ever been a man. So I want to be real clear that my perspective, I in no way, shape, or form have any authority to speak on behalf of men or anyone for that matter. However, but as someone who has worked for, oh my goodness, over 20 years in addressing issues of rape and battering and abuse as largely perpetrated against females and largely perpetrated by males, it has brought me into very close proximity into dealing with men and women and violence. And in working areas of prevention, it has led many of us who do this work to consider this notion of gender-based violence and how we have somehow, as a society and a culture, gendered or masculinity has become gendered with this notion of violence. And so I think that this film does a really good job of revealing the fallacies that are associated with masculinity and violence. And I have more thoughts, and I'll address them later on if you want. But I just think that I think that one thing that you do get out of watching this film, if nothing else, is that you are compelled to really see the very kind of prismatic and complex ways in which we have to deal with issues of masculinity.
Thank you, Leah. David, would you mind?
The film, it was a great film. I can identify myself with a lot of the kids and a lot of the stuff that was going on. They couldn't have painted a better picture of what's really happening out there, especially in low-income communities like South Central and Watts and Compton. A lot of what we saw there it's happening now today as we speak. And I know the kids just went back to school, and I have a 9-year-old stepson, and I just had this conversation with him earlier today actually about just him being afraid to go back to school because of that for those reasons. And it was really this film is, I feel like it's a film that every parent should watch, and every kid that's going through stuff like that, and not just every kid that's going through stuff like that, but it should be shown like in schools. I feel it was like one of those short films that I was just like, why is this this should be shown at schools, like people should be seeing this. And so it really made a big impact on me, and I have more to say about that later. Thank you.
Derek?
A lot of the challenges that I saw from many of our youth, our males, because I think that we confuse malehood with manhood. Males, when we became a certain age, we can do certain things, but becoming a man becomes with responsibility, accountability, and it's something that you're taught. And in the inner city community, and I'm from Brooklyn, New York, the projects, Fort Greene projects, we still at that time had men, and they would show me how to, through their actions, how to love their wives, how to take care of the kids. They would take us outside. They would play with us. Also, the men, I was just telling two of my colleagues here, George Weaver and Dr. Ivy, I was watching a program on NBA TV, and Isaiah Thomas said something that was so profound to me, it blew my mind. He said that, and it was true when I was in high school, that coaches were educators that used sports to teach our children character and life lessons. That no longer occurs. We leave. Ladies, single ladies and young men, I apologize because I was taught better. And when I got to LA, I wanted to live on the other side of Angeles Vista. And I forgot those lessons that had been taught to me by men, so that I could protect my community and I could protect the young babies the way I was protected. And I apologize for that because I knew better. I knew better. And when I saw what those young boys needed was something that I got love. And when you provide love, they call me coach because I go back, I'm in the elementary schools. And, I'm there. And I'm going to be honest, I don't know what I'm doing. I don't. I know one thing I'm doing, I'm loving. I'm giving them hugs. I'm telling them what they can be. I have ADHD, but my mother and my grandmother and people around me always said, you were going to college. So because that was in the back of my mind, I went to college, became a college graduate. I tell this to these children, okay, our children, don't call your stepson, that's your son. You accept the responsibility when you decided to be with his mother, right? That's your son. Society tells us, they label us, step. No. My wife taught me that. She don't call, children I had in my first relationship, stepchildren. Hey, Anthony and Nicole are her children. And she will get in your behind if you dare say it, call her stepmother. And these are the things that we have to do. We have to get back to that, to love. Because if we don't, if we start thinking about it, let me worry about me, myself, and our children are going to fall off. Fellas, we got to step up. Because our communities are calling for us to do that, and we're not.
Thank you. So before I get to the next question, I have a question for the audience, if you don't mind sharing. For those of you that were raised without biological dads in the home, please raise your hand. And for those of you who are fathers, the men in the room, raise your hand. Okay. And one of the young men here that blessed the mic when we were doing the spoken word before made this phrase, and I'm probably messing it up, but it's a paraphrase. He said, my father's ghost I saw. My father's ghost I saw. And so my question to the panelists is, what role do fathers have in developing a young child's masculinity, or maybe their absence have in developing a child's masculinity? Do you mind if we start with you, Derek?
Understand this, ladies, as males, we're visual, okay? And we're going to emulate what we see. So if we see a man that is loving, a man that is sensitive, then we will open up and we will be that way. If we see a man that thinks that by being dominant, that is being a man, that's what he's going to become. So it's very important for our children to see us love our wives. It's nothing wrong with crying. As I tell the kids, I'm not a religious person, but I'm spiritual. When I read the Bible, one of the greatest soldiers was David, and he boo-hoo in the drop of a dime, right? It's okay. And as we start to teach our children that, it's okay. And then let's sit down and just look at them. You can tell, I'm telling you, you know something's wrong with a child. If you take the time you look, you'll know. Because they, especially boys, we wear it right here. So, we put our heads down, take some time and just go talk to them. And when we start to do that, we'll start to break, just start chipping away. And that boy will become a teenager, will become a man.
I know firsthand that being a father, it's a big commitment, big responsibility, and the father is, to get looked upon like, wow, like that's my dad or that's my mom. I didn't have a father. I did have a dad. He did the best he could under the circumstances that he was living in. He was a drug addict. He used to beat on my mom. He used to beat on me and my little brothers. He left when I was 9. He got arrested and then deported, like the guy you guys, yeah, same deal. He was deported, never seen him again. So I was 9, no father figure. My mom did the best she could to teach us how to be a man. Although she don't know what it is to be a man, you know, because she didn't have a father like that in her life. My grandpa was very abusive, as from what I remember her telling me. And so it was a pattern that went down. And I didn't know what a good father or a good father or responsible man was like, even a young man, until I met this man, Chris Henriksen. I didn't know what that was like. The other day I walked away from a conversation that I was having with my family, I would say, because it got heated, man. Like one of the questions was like, in a situation where your son gets jumped at school, how will you react to it? Like if he comes home and he tells you, "Hey, Dad, I just got jumped at school," how would you react to it? And my first thing was like, let's go ride on him. You know what I mean? Let's go do this. Like, let's go do this. And because but I'm gonna tell you why. Because when I was little and I was 9, and I used to get punked around and beat up or whatever, and I used to tell my dad. My dad didn't do anything about it, and it hurt my soul, and it really hurt my soul when somebody would do something to me or disrespect me or call me out of my name, and I felt like the right thing to do was go tell my dad. And then I tell my dad, like, "Hey, Dad, well, such and such just smacked me across the head." And he's like, "Oh, yeah, don't worry about it. Don't worry." To me, that didn't make sense in my head. It was like, he don't love me. Like, he doesn't love me. He doesn't protect me. So that's where my defense comes in. Like, I don't want my kid. I have 2 daughters. I have a 8-month-old daughter, and I have a 3-year-old daughter. And I just can't imagine what that would be like. And I guess I'm not ready. I'm not ready in some level to fully accept. Yeah, exactly. Like some fully. No, not that I have a kid. That's aside. Like those are my kids. I love them to death. What I do is for them. But more like, like what's gonna happen when they do come to me? They're 15 years old, and I'm a 30, 40-year-old man. I'm 23. And I'm a 40-year-old man or whatever, and they're like, "Dad, dude down the street just grabbed my ass," or whatever, right? Like, are we gonna call the principal? Who do we call when we're all in the world and we're not in school? Who do we call? Do I call the police? What do I do? It's like, what do I do in that situation? And so those things play in my head. And as for now, like, I really don't know what the challenges that one faces in the long run, because they're small, man. They're small. And when I used to tell my dad, like I said, he didn't do anything about it. My mom, I used to tell her she didn't speak English. She wasn't going to go down there to the principal and be like, "Hey, my son just got hit by, little Mikey or whatever." She couldn't communicate like that. So I felt like I needed to stand up for my own. And that right there, left alone, it just shows me like being a father is a huge responsibility, because your children will come at you with those problems, and they will come and talk to you. Just like my little 9-year-old, he comes and he tells me stuff, and sometimes I don't have the answer for him. And it's because when I had those same problems and I told my dad, they didn't have answers for me. They didn't have answers for me. My mom didn't have answers for me. My uncles didn't have answers for me. So I didn't learn any of that stuff. Growing up, like that dude said, it's like, how do men handle conflict in poor neighborhoods? Through violence. It's all through violence, man. All through violence. So I guess that I'm still, growing and walking that journey. And it's a wound that needs healing, and it's a wound that needs to be addressed. And on top of that, it's like love. It's a lot of love needs to come into my soul for me to see things differently. Yeah, especially just being a young father, it's protective and stuff. So.
Thanks, David. Leah, you got any input on that?
I have to kind of, in thinking about your question, I have to pull some things apart in order to grasp it because it's a big question. And I think that there are differences between parents or adults who are kinship, or parents or adults who have the responsibility for bringing up children the way they should go. I'm going to get biblical. And representations of maleness and representations of femaleness, right? So I grew up the product of teen parents who neither of which were ready to be parents. So I was raised by a grandmother. So there was no constant father figure, if you will, in the home. And mother was only a little bit more constant in her presence. So grandma was the foundation. And in our neighborhood, it was kind of like, you got a daddy in your house? Wow. So it wasn't uncommon for people in the community where I grew up, in the south side of Chicago, at the time that I grew up, which was in the early 70s. And wow, you live in a house? Wow. I think that there are ways to think about this in terms of, I have to situate this within a conversation, a larger conversation around race, class, and poverty, police brutality, the world changing, blah, 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 blah. And so for me, in thinking about what kind of male representations there were in my community, because I'm learning, because I don't have a male in the house, I am taking in what maleness means to me based on what I'm exposed to. And in some of those instances, it involved sexual abuse. In some of those instances, it involved domestic violence. In some of those instances, it involved a great-grandfather, Pa Fate, who was very quiet, but always carried a pistol. And that was Pa Fate, because Pa Fate was from Mississippi, and he lived on the south side of Chicago. So as a black man in the south side of Chicago, he carried a pistol with him everywhere. My father, who I love and adore, he did the best he could, right? And so, and especially after you become a parent, you realize the real meaning behind being a parent and doing the best you can, right? Because before you have kids, you're like, I'm going to be a much better parent than you are. And then you have your own and you go, whoa, yeah, best. You give your parents cut a lot of slack after you become your own parent. And so I think that for you're dealt a hand, you have a situation, as one of the young men in the film said, when he got beat up, he went and told his dad, and his dad said, deal with it. And a lot of stuff happens to us in life, and we learn to deal with it, and we deal with it according to the examples that are presented to us and the lessons that we learn, that we glean from life around us. And so not having my grandmother had her male friends, George in particular, and he was never a boyfriend, but George was always there, and George helped out, and George brought groceries, and George would feed us sometimes, and George would help us shovel the snow in the George was a helpmate to my grandmother in many instances. So I'm learning that there are adults who are there to help us grow up the way that we become, and some of them happen to be male, and some of those versions are healthier than others. So that what winds up happening is, as I grow up and I start looking for a partner who happens to be male, and one of the things that we can talk about is this kind of binary notion of masculinity and femininity. But we think about what are the performances of masculinity that are out there, and when I am looking for a partner who happens to be male, what kind of masculinity am I going to respond to that I am accustomed to or that I will reject? And that's really kind of qualified by my values and what I think I would like to pass on to my own children. So I that's a long way around, but I think that for those of us who didn't have a guy, but there were men around. There was Uncle Dinky, who was hung out at the tavern on the corner with other men who liked to drink starting at 11:30 in the morning. And I'm not trying to paint a particular kind of bleak existence. It just is what it was. And Uncle Dinky had elements of him that were wrapped up in a particular kind of performance of masculinity that can be troublesome and problematic. But Uncle Dinky also loved me. And, we talk about performances of masculinity. We have warrior cultures around masculinity. And before modernity and, kind of like the advent of civilization, warrior cultures were revered and respected, and it was something that you looked upon, and it did not involve a lot of, it involved rape and battering in a different kind of context. But, you had these kind of societies that were structured around particular kinds of performance of masculinity. And Uncle Dinky, if anybody tried to hurt Uncle Dinky's family, he would deal with it, as you say. He would deal with it. And as a community, that was a value that we had on 63rd Street.
Thank you. And I just want to say as a qualifier to that question, I'm not trying to imply that it's just males that have an impact. Obviously, women in our culture are big carriers of these cultural messages about what healthy or unhealthy masculinity is. And I myself, being raised by a strong single mother with 3 crazy brothers, I can attest to the fact that women can have a very beautiful and lasting and strong impact on how young men are raised also. So I just wanted to put that out there. We're kind of pushing on time, but I do want to get this one question before we open it to the rest of the audience to get some Q&A in here. And I'm really basing this mainly on all of your experience and expertise and time in working with young men of color here in Los Angeles. So my question to you all is, what can we do as community partners, as people involved in social activism? What can we do to help the young men here now in Los Angeles to be able to push past some of these unhealthy conceptions of masculinity, to give them the permission to be able to get outside of that man box and be fully human, which will obviously going to have a big impact on the rates of violence, the rates of self-destruction, and all that stuff. But I'm trying to localize it with this question because we've got resources in the room. You all sitting up here are a resource. I'm not asking for the magic bullet because there isn't one, but just give me some thoughts on what you feel can be done now with the youth here in Los Angeles, the young men of color here in Los Angeles, to help them through what they're going through. Would you mind starting?
What we have to do is go back into the communities and work with men, like if going to Jordan Downs, going to Nickerson Garden, going to Aliso Village, and work with men that are very familiar with the community, that want to make a difference because they've been through it all, and it becomes personal to them. With all the things that I've gone through in my life, this is personal to me. So I know that I can make a difference. Go to them, help them, understand we're going to have our setbacks. That's just part of life. But just stay with them, continue to train them, and allow them to lead these young men, because they already know the young men. And I guarantee you that is how we will, as one of my mentors say, infect, not affect, but infect these young men's lives so that we can start to get the change that they want. Not just us, but that they want in their lives.
Beautiful. David?
Yeah, so I feel like one of the things that helped me a lot when I was young, I feel like I needed to belong. I feel like I needed to belong and I needed to be a part of something, especially as a young child that didn't have a lot of role models. And so I remember there was this one teacher, his name was Mr. Evans, and he started the Boy Scouts at my school. And I come from a very poor family, couldn't afford the uniform, even to get enrolled in that. So he paid for that, for me to join the Boy Scouts. As a young child, that showed me that somebody cared. And me being 8 years old and watching this African-American man who he doesn't even know my family, but I made an impact on him just by having conversation. He was like, dude, you need to be doing something else and not hanging out with them over there, or hanging out with, those guys, I don't know, or whatever. But I feel there needs to be, believe it or not, more free, listen to this, free nonprofits, free places where kids can come and they don't have to pay. Because a lot of the kids that you're talking about, they're poor, man. They're poor. These kids can't afford that shit. Like, they don't have like the 5-star or 3-star soccer team or baseball team, or they can't afford that, you know what I mean? But they want to be a part of something like that, whether it's a poetry writing group, whether it's learning karate, whatever it is. But these kids need a place especially when they're young, man. A place where they can be like, damn, like that's an option. I can do that. Like if I want to go play soccer, I know that team over there, they're gonna take me because it's open. It's for everybody, you know? And there's none of that. I don't see none of that because I live in South Central. And I tell you that right now, there is none of that. You have to pay. And a lot of these people, like, how can you pay when you're under, like, minimum wage and shit? Like, these people can't do that, you know what I mean? So the only PE and soccer you're getting is at school, you know? It's at school. And some of the kids, like, it's one field to, like, 100 and some kids. Like, come on, there needs to be more of that, like, in the parks, outside, nonprofits, street poets, YMC, whatever it is. There needs to be more. There needs to be more.
Amen. Just if I can do a little quick add-on to what David was sharing. I mean, we all know that it takes for every dollar that you drop into a prevention program, you're going to save $3 down the line on intervention. It has a hell of a lot cheaper to be able to pay for a youth program that would be free to the community than it is to incarcerate young men and women and put them in jail. So I'm sorry, I had to preach a little bit. Go ahead, Leah.
I would say whatever you do, and from whatever perspective or orientation that you have in doing this kind of work, recognize two things. One, that this is about justice. So that means that you have to be committed to it. You have to internalize a particular kind of philosophy and approach and know that this is about justice, in my opinion. And then the second thing is that I would say, especially with the notion of the mask you live in, you cannot, if you're going to do this work, you cannot leave people defenseless. Because the mask is some level of defense, particularly for these young men, and we have to remember that masculinity can be racialized also. And so we were talking about young men of color, and I'll tell a real quick story about Homeboy 101. And years ago, we had a program that we were running in a school in the San Fernando Valley, and some of you may have heard me tell this story before. We had, this is when LA Unified needed to kind of boost its numbers, so they kind of opened the doors and let anybody go to any school at any time as opposed to going to school according to district. So consequently, one of the unintended consequences of that is that you had competing and rival gangs attending the same schools. And so what you saw is a spike or increase in gang violence, and they had us come in. They had the domestic violence sexual assault agency come in and work with the homeboys. So I was like, okay. We had a violence prevention curriculum. They said, oh, what's about rape and battery? They said, we don't care. Just come deal with them. So okay, we dealt with it. And what they did was they gave us a classroom with 47 homeboys from 15 different neighborhoods, all in one class for an entire school year. And we were there 2 to 3 days a week, and we were going through the curriculum. Eventually ran out of activities in our curriculum, and they didn't want us to leave, so we kept coming back. And we're talking all this good shit about nonviolence and, keeping the peace, and, you got to learn new tools and new strategies. And they always had an excuse for why they couldn't do something different. And we were in it, and we were like, yeah, but you just got to do this. And they were like, you dissed me. It's like, yeah, but respect is this. And we have them redefine a whole bunch of things, and stuff was starting to take, the seeds were being planted, because that's really what a lot of primary prevention is about, seed planting, right? And maybe you won't be around to see it come to fruition, but you really want to make sure you're planting the right seeds. And a couple of the guys checked out of the school and went somewhere else. And we're like, no, don't leave the school. And they said, nah, miss, we got to go. And we're like, okay. And they left on like a Tuesday. On a Friday, we heard that some stuff was going to go down. So the guys come into class on Friday, just because the word and the grapevine and the hood. And it was just like, come on, calm down. And remind me if I'm not telling the story right, because it's been a while. But on Thursday, we had found out that a couple of the guys that had checked out had been murdered over the previous weekend in gang-related homicides. That Friday, with the guys who were still in the class, it was the toughest, roughest day, because all that good shit that we had talked went right out of the window. And they were planning and they were plotting on how they were going to get back at these dudes. That had to have been absolutely the longest weekend in doing this work because I didn't know if I came back on Monday if any of them were going to be alive. And I felt like by taking and working against the masks of hypermasculinity and street gang masculinity that they had grown into was the only defense that they had. And they said, you don't understand. If we don't strike back, everybody will know there's a green light on us. I came back to Patty. I said, Patty, we got to come up with something else because we have left them, we have stripped them and left them defenseless. So when you're talking about the mask, we have to make sure that we are replacing that mask with something else that is powerful, that will fit them, that they can actually walk around in and not feel like they have targets on their backs and that there's a green light on them. That was a really tough. You cannot leave them defenseless. You got to give them some tools. You got to give them a place to go. You got to give them options. Sometimes that may mean you have to give them your own cell phone number so that you know that they're okay over the weekend. You have to be prepared, and that's the part I mean about this is about justice, right? So do not, if you take down one mask, you got to give them something else to work with.
So I want to make sure that thank you, Leah. I want to make sure that we've got time to have the folks in the audience shoot up some questions here to the panel. So if there's anyone that does have a question, please raise their hand. I believe there's someone back there, Jen, with a mic.
Okay. First of all, shout out to the Mask That You Live In's creators. Great film. And also to the panelists, good looking out. We really appreciate this and have appreciated your perspective so far. My name is Sterling Somerville. I work for an educational nonprofit here in Los Angeles called the Fulfillment Fund. I work specifically at Crenshaw High School, so if any of you all know the LA area, you know I'm on ground zero holding it down, working with 9th, 10th, 11th, and 12th graders there. So I guess the question that I would pose, being in my position where I'm at, would be, we are working with soldiers. We're working with warriors. We're working with people coming in and out of, young people coming in and out of traumatic situations, very much just like any conflict areas that you see all over the world. Our kids are being forced to fight battles on several different fronts all at the same time. And these masks that we're talking about is pretty much one of the only defenses that we know of. So, Leah, I know you just spoke to arming our young people, arming our young men of color with something else. My question would be, at the intersectionality of race, culture, and gender identity, how can a person in my perspective, now I've got a couple of tools that I already use, but I'm looking for help for any other tools that I can use to help our young men of color who are the rock stars of young man's masculinity. These are the rock stars, the poster boys. This is NWA. This is the future of Compton's finest, of Crenshaw's finest. If I've got Schoolboy Q and I've got, every single big time rapper coming out of my high school, coming out of my area, what makes you think that you can tell me how to do something differently when I am everything that I'm supposed to be and then some? The girls love me. I'm a part of this gang. I'm, living in this area and I'm doing exactly what society tells me I should be doing. What are you going to arm me with? Or what can you tell me to tell them to show them that it's a better way?
Well, to me, those rappers, Schoolboy and all them guys are talking about gangs and drugs, and they ain't nobody, really. You know what I mean? They're just part of the cycle. They're just part of the cycle that's going on out there. The kids are getting killed. They feed on to all of that stuff, man. So, like at my house, for example, real fast, like he has a little video game, whatever, but then there's those shooting video games like Call of Duty or Grand Theft Auto, and none of that is allowed in my house. None of that. No toy guns, none of that stuff at my house. And a lot of the reason why is because I had that stuff when I was little. You know what I mean? I had those kind of stuff, and I know what it did to me, and how it played in my mind. And so I think where it really starts is like those little rappers that are doing all that rapping and all that, they need to switch up that little flow that they got, you know what I mean? And really start changing the message that these kids hear. Because what these kids hear and they see is what they want to become. And we just saw that here. You know what I mean? Whatever they see and they feel, whatever's masculine to them, that's what they want to be, you know? So somebody who's like, can you imagine if, like, for example, like Lil Wayne, for example, can you imagine if somebody like him only spoke about truth, you know, and world struggles and hunger and what people really go through. You know what I mean? What people really go through. That's medicine. That's medicine for people. That's what people be like, man, you know, like that dude, he's a freedom fighter. You know, he's speaking up on the things that are really going on. These other rappers that talk about this and that, and that to me is really it's really an option to listen to that kind of music, to have I know people, some like Vitaly want to do a street post. He doesn't have a TV at home. He doesn't have a radio at home. He doesn't have, you know, and to me, it's like what needs to change is the message. That's where I'm coming from. The message that's being portrayed out in the world to the kids needs to change. That's what I feel.
Yeah. What I would just say, what I found to work with me, being in that community, I live in the 90043, don't tell them. You have to show them. Okay? Our children and our young adults stay in that 2.5-mile radius. Work with, you know, the California Endowment, other organizations. Take them and let them see different things. Try to go to AEG so that they can see what it's like to run Staples Center. Okay? And that they can do these type of things. Because everybody's talking to them. So why are they going to just take what you're saying? And then you got to actually, I challenge this to every adult. You know, you got to treat them like you treat your child. And that's going to be hard. All right? But if my son does something in the streets tonight, I'm not going to discard him. I'm not going to discard him. So now if Marquise Lingus does something in the street tonight, I can't discard him. And if I do, I'm foul. And if you do, you're being foul. You're being selfish. Then we can't expect to change their lives.
Quickly, what I would add to the message needs to change and making sure that we, each one teach one, embrace people like family, because for me, that's part of justice. Where the other thing that I would add to your question is that for me, what's been valuable in terms of dealing with communities is that you have to meet them where they're at, and particularly if you're doing prevention work. I feel like if you're doing prevention work, you have to understand those norms and those values, those beliefs that dominate the narrative for belonging to that particular group, whatever that is. And quick story, I used to work with pregnant parenting teenage girls who were in a pregnant girls' home, right? They had, for whatever reason, they had to go off and live at a home for pregnant girls. And doing sexual assault and domestic violence work with these teenage girls, and I'd come in and talk about how you don't want to be in an abusive relationship, and they would all sit there and go, but we're not in abusive relationships. And I go, and I know, I've already talked to your social workers, I know 80% of you grew up being sexually abused. I know 50% of you, your baby daddy raped you. I already know this about your history and your past, but as we have these conversations about rape and battering, you're telling me that that does not exist in your life. And I realized I was trying to convince them that they were something that, and to see themselves in a way in which they did not see themselves. They did not see themselves as victims. They did not see themselves at risk for anything. They saw themselves as thriving. Okay. So the next time one of them said, yeah, I ain't gonna get raped. He need to be scared of me. And he's blah, blah, blah. And I was like, wow. I said, you know what? I think it's fabulous that you're not gonna get raped. Now, what are you gonna do to ensure that that will never happen to you or that baby that you're carrying? Then that was a different question. Then it became what's important to you and how will you ensure that you get there. So if they're going to be the next fill in the blank, how are you going to get there? Great. What's important to you about that? Do you understand that resiliency, mastery, self-seeking behaviors, being pro-social, all those kind of things will help get you to where you want to be? I had to sugarcoat my pill, right? And I had to wrap it in this dream that they had aspired to. Fantastic. Let's come up with the plan on how you're going to be the next rapper. Okay, now what are the things that are going to keep you from getting there? Violence, substance abuse, committing, acts of sexual abuse, or having a baby before you're ready to do it. What are those things that are going to prevent you from achieving your goals and your dreams? I had to meet them where they were, and then I said, let's plan on how you're going to get there. And then what are those things we have to prevent from occurring, right? Because you can't really measure what didn't happen. So how are we going to put certain things in place to make sure that you're able to achieve those values, those goals, those dreams, those priorities that you say that you want to accomplish? Well, if you're going around and getting drunk and getting high and joyriding with your homies and throwing things out of windows and all that kind of stuff, those are the things that are going to prevent you from getting to where you want to go. And the more I spent time working with my pregnant parenting girls in that kind of capacity, and then I started using that model with my incarcerated youth, and I started using that model with adults, whoever, when they denied, because denial is very powerful. It's very, very powerful. And you're doing good work, brother, but I could guess that maybe you're not making Donald Trump money doing what you do. You're probably not. That's an assumption. I could be wrong. They think they're going to make Donald Trump money. Great. How are we going to get you there? What's the plan? And then how are you going to ward off those things that will prohibit you from getting there? Well, guess what? Violence is one of those things that will keep you from getting there. So how are you going to keep that at bay? Right? So that you had to meet them where they were, and you got to help them strategize to prevent it from ever occurring.
Go ahead.
Thank you. My question is more of advice from you. I'm in the process of starting a nonprofit that mentors African American and Latino students at the community college. And I did not plan to be here, so this is not a commercial or anything. It's just it's serendipity, I guess you could say. But part of the reason I didn't want to share my project with anyone is because I'm afraid of the older people in our communities. When I came back from school, the first thing I wanted to do was impact my community, and it was older Latinos that were the biggest obstacle. Because who do you think you are? Oh, now you think you're all that because you went to this school or that, or you work at this big company or that. So imagine all the enthusiasm I came in with shattered right there by the people who I looked up to, and some of them that I read about in the books at school. So I don't want to bring those people to these young Latinos. So now I'm a gatekeeper. So I'm using my money. I'm using my resources, my small sphere of influence. But I think you can sense how it affects me just talking about that, because I don't trust the men in my community. So how do I work with the men in my community, and how do I help the young Latinos who are coming behind me to be different from them? And to that, I did grow up without a father, and that whole movie was mine, and I just think it's very telling of the problems we're having. So my question to you is, how do you get past that? How do you build a viable nonprofit that doesn't get co-opted? And to David, you know what? Those rappers did exist. They're called KRS-One and Nas. And you know what happens when they talk about the truth? Nobody buys their music. Nobody plays them on the radio. And they don't play them on the radio. Because what we're dealing with is a prison industrial complex, a military industrial complex, a media that is bought and paid for in this country. And I'm very angry about that. So I am an angry kind of brown man. I am 100% Latino, but I'm just not that brown. So anyways, I do want to get your insights on those things. Thank you.
Derek, you want to go ahead and...
What you just experienced, that's the norm. And now you have to have the perseverance and the persistence to find individuals. I'm going to get your number, because we have to find a way, okay, to make this work. And change is difficult for past generations because they're giving up control. And they don't want to give that up. Yeah, so it is hard, you know. You wait about another year and a half, you're going to be like me. I'm telling you, going to bed at 12 o'clock, getting up 3 in the morning, tossing and turning, and you're like, I don't understand this because you said this is personal to you. It's personal, and you can't understand why. You know, I'm not trying to hurt anybody. I'm trying to lift us. And I'm getting all of this negative energy and conflict from individuals, and I don't understand why. So, you know, what my recommendation would be, you know, some positive people here. And when we shake hands, I'm going to tell you like I tell everybody else, I'm not going anywhere. So whatever I can do to help you, then I got to do it. And because you're going to have long nights. Yeah, that's your wife? Oh, you by yourself? Okay, yeah. So you're going to find out, you know, in this challenge that we have in nonprofit and trying to make a difference, especially when none of us are making any money. You know, we're not in this to make any money. So, you know, just understand you have to just be patient, and at the end of the day, I guarantee you, it's going to be all right. When you get that first individual that breaks that glass ceiling, then you're going to be like, okay, it was worth it. And then others are going to start to follow. And then those that resisted, they're going to realize, yeah, either I jump on board where I can still be relevant, or, you know, they're going to be passed by.
I feel like, man, look, I'm a gardener. You know what I mean? I'm a gardener, and I was born here. And some of my people, when I introduced the seed and soil organic gardening and what I wanted to do and what I believed in, and I brought it back to my people, and I told them, you gonna be a gardener? I'd be like, what? That's like, you know, that's what Pedro's dad does. And he's like, you were born here. Like, what are you doing? Like, you were born here. What are you doing? Like, go to college. And I'm like, go to college? This is what I want to do. This is what I want to do. This is where I feel at place, and this is how I want to feed my family. And if this is what I want to do, I'm going to go for it. I don't care what anybody says. I am a gardener, and that's who I am, you know. And I'm a poet, gardener, and I'm a father of 3. And that's what it is. So my advice is go for it, because there's somebody that is going to believe in you. And I know that because there's people that believe in me, and I don't have anything. You know what I mean? So, yeah.
From a strategy standpoint, those are 2 different strategies. Working with the old folks and working with the youth. Those are a minimum of 2 different strategies, right? But the approach can be similar, which is you have to find what's important to each of those demographics, right? And then you have to work to develop trust with each of those communities, whether it's you dealing with the older folks or the young folks. They have to trust you. And in the course of discovering what is important to them, you eventually will have the ability to have a conversation with them about change and what that change can look like, and break through whatever those barriers are. Some of the community organizing that I used to do as a black woman who has lived in Los Angeles for over 30 years, there's no reason I should not speak Spanish, but I don't. It's really pathetic. Doing community organizing in the San Fernando Valley with almost 100% Latinos, a significant percentage of which were monolingual Spanish speaking, and working with my Latino brothers and sisters, with the Latino men. Now, I'm the one at the health fair who sits at the rape and battering table. Nobody comes to the rape table to see, ooh, what are you guys giving out, right? Nobody comes to the rape table at the health fair. They don't want the brochures. They don't want the little tchotchkes you're giving away. They don't care that it's a cute pin or that you got a spinny wheel that says win a prize. The minute they come over, they're like, ooh, this is the rape battering table now. We don't want nothing to do with y'all, right? So I understand what it's like to be selling something that is really unpopular. So you have to figure out a way to, instead of thinking about, you know, there's the we're trying to prevent the violence, but we're also trying to promote the health, right? You have to find a way to make it important and significant in people's lives. And so my Latino sisters and brothers, they would sit up with the Latino dads in the garages on Sundays, and if it was football season, they'd watch football. And it would just be guys sitting around talking about football. And eventually the conversation would take a turn after a certain amount of trust had been developed. And then it's like, well, what can we do? How can we get involved? And it had to involve, you had to pinpoint what it was they could contribute. Again, I can't change you, but I can ask you what is important to you. And most people can agree that they want to live in a society that's free from violence. Most people can agree with that, right? So if we agree with that, well, then what's the best way we can do that? Even as we sit up and watch football, right? Okay? Because we are able to make distinctions between performances of aggression, which that's what football and these films and these video games to a certain degree allow us to have kind of like a fantasy existence around that. And then the real world, the stuff that all of those men in that garage were exposed to growing up themselves, right? So how do I make it important to you? And we worked with people who were influencers. All you need is one, as this brother right here said, one, the head buffalo, and all the rest will follow. The influencer, right? Come on, y'all, we're going to go do this. If it's a car wash, if it's a community walk, if it's whatever it is, we're out here trying to increase the peace. They don't have to have all of the analytics, right? They have to have the heart, and they have to be the gatekeeper who says, no, we're not going to do that here. No, y'all can't bring your toy guns over here. You can't bring your toy guns to this event. Slowly. This is the justice part. This is the endurance and the stamina part, right? But you just meet people where they're at, and then you gotta figure out a way to turn violence prevention, turn the rape and battering table into healthy relationships.